Hey folks, yet another NixOS video. This one is NixOS number 67, and I'm going to give you a tour of my Nix configuration. FYI, the talkie script on the left-hand side that's entitled NixOS 67 will be available in a link in the video description, although I don't think it will be very useful on its own. It's meant just as kind of a guide for me to read stuff as I make this video. I've been hacking on my Nix configuration for about a year. It is currently based on Flakes, and it configures multiple machines. And it has undergone a level of factoring that you might call basic, meaning that there are factorings in there that I could do that would, I could create a function that would reduce some boilerplate in the configuration, but it makes it much less readable and understandable. So, all you Nix heads out there who say yes, you cannot repeat yourself there. I know, I don't have to, but I did anyway. So here is the what is in my Etsy NixOS directory, which is also over here. So this is my Etsy NixOS directory, although I've called it .nixconfig. It's checked into Git. And as you can see, it's got a bunch of stuff in it. It's not exactly one file configures everything, as many Nix videos describe. And I think this would be a common theme for many people who've been using Nix for more than, a few days or a month or a couple months or whatever. And this is mainly due to factoring. As I said, this configures multiple systems with multiple users, and these systems have different roles, and so one file solution is not gonna work. You gotta put things in multiple files at some point. So the first file I want to talk about is called flake.nix, and I'm going to go over here. You can see it. A flake file is more or less just something that defines a set of inputs, which are usually URLs to GitHub repositories, and a set of outputs, which can be anything. In this case, we're configuring NixOS, so it's going to produce NixOS systems, or a NixOS configuration here. Inside of this flake.nix, I actually configure it to use NixOS 2311 Nix packages, Nix packages unstable, a thing called NixOS hardware, Nix gaming, my own fork of Nix packages, and a variety of other URLs like KDE to Nix and Nix to Planet, and things that I'm interested in, but really aren't used that much. Mostly it's about Nix packages in here. In the outputs, I set up modules related, and this term is actually overloaded. That the folks who've written some of this stuff are maybe less careful with their language than you might like. You will be chastised by some folks for using the term module to refer to a .nix file. A module, the name is reserved for Nix files that have options in them, like things that set up do metacoding, so that you can refer to them and say programs.myprogram enable equal true or something like that. That technically is what a module is defined as, but people are pretty loose with language, and they call some of these things modules in here. When we define a system, we pass it a set of modules that it's going to use. They're not technically modules, they're just Nix files, but that's how it goes, man. So inside of this Flakes file, I set up modules that are related to each of two users. And the two users are Larry, my friend, and me, Chris, here. And we have slightly different sets of inputs, sets of Nix file inputs. I also set up something that's for both of us here, so I can use both configurations, or both users on the same system. Down here in each one of these systems, these NixOS configurations, this think Nix 512 equals NixOS system thing, we use those modules. I use on this one just modules for me, which is the stuff I've defined in my Chris modules thing, which is home manager. I have my user. On this particular system, the Nix 512, I also use a host-specific configuration. So that's why this factoring is like this. So when I run NixOS rebuild, the host name on which NixOS rebuild has been executed is looked up, and a NixOS system, one of these things here, think Nix 512, Nix 50, whatever, is found, and the NixOS system that it matches is built. And the raison d'etre of this Flakes thing is, for NixOS anyway, is to be able to configure multiple systems like this in a repeatable way. All my configuration for 8 systems, Nix 512, Nix 50, 52, 51, things at 420, ThinkCenter, Optinix, and NixOS are defined in this file. So I do not have separate Etsy NixOS directories on each system. They're just checkouts of the same thing. I can check in from any of them. So one important feature of this thing, it doesn't really have to do anything with factoring, particularly across systems, but one thing that's an important concept to understand in Nix itself is the concept of an overlay. So I've shown here this overlays function. This is a function that takes 2 arguments, self and super, and then it says steam equals super steam override, meaning that from whatever Nix packages repository I'm passing in as the thing I want to override, it override some extra profile stuff in there. And what I'm doing here is for the default Nix packages repository that I use to get Steam, it's very important that I get the latest glorious eggroll Proton version. Don't you know that this is important? So I pass the thing that creates the Steam derivation, this extra profile stuff that will get me the latest glorious eggroll there. And this is a common way for people to use Nix packages and make Nix packages do something slightly different than the default. So overlays are super useful for that. There's another way to convince NixOS to do something slightly different, convince Nix packages to do something slightly different. It is possible to fork a Nix packages repository, the Nix packages repository, and if you can't figure out how to make it work in an overlay, you can make your own fork of the Nix packages repository, make some changes to the stuff within it, and then use that in your Flake here. And then you can later use something derived from this Nix packages version in your actual configuration. So in this case, Keybase, which is a private messenger application, stopped working because they packaged a root certificate in their application, and I think either the people that handed out the root certificate went out of business, or something happened where the application stopped working, and there was kind of an emergency release of the thing, and that was just over the last couple of days. And I'm sure eventually either I or someone else will commit a fix upstream that gets us, or propose a fix upstream that gets us the new version of Keybase that makes things work again. But I couldn't figure out how to do this via an overlay, so I forked Nix packages. I then pass along this thing called packages keybase bump version in arguments to that when files get imported, other files. So we'll take a look at it here. This is a little in the weeds, but I will go to users. Inside of here, I actually use that version of Nix packages in here. So I'm not using the packages here. I'm using packages keybase bump version instead in order to get the new version. So that is quite useful and something that is easy to do with Flakes. And I also do a similar thing. Of course, it's not a fork; it's just a branch in the repository in the Nix packages repository. Um, I do a similar thing with the unstable version of Nix packages, so I can use things from there. And then I have a couple other forks or other inputs that relate to packages that I want to install from old versions of Nix packages that have been like these two Nix packages, Pi 3.6 and Pi 3.7. These uh, packages have been removed in later Nix packages, but I can rewind in time and say yes, I want it from that long ago. Please go get me that thing, and then I can use Nix packages Pi 3.6 in there and install Python 3.6 or 2.7, 3.7. Sorry. So inside of the quote unquote modules list for each user, uh, I pass in for Chris, I pass in an import of users chrism home manager.nix, and for Larry, for users Larry home manager or hm.nix. And I also pass in for Chris a NixOS level, system level configuration. It has nothing to do with home manager for that user, and similarly for Larry here. If I go and take a look at what is inside of, let's take a look at users chrism hm.nix. This is long and complicated. I do a lot of home manager stuff, but basically, this file configures GNOME terminal the way I like it. All this, all this faffing around with programs, GNOME terminal, colors, and all that stuff. That's all done through home manager. I configure SSH client options inside of here. I configure my Git and my Emacs and my ZSH stuff in here, which is all this programs.chs stuff plus some other stuff up here that's related to it. And that's kind of it. It's super complicated, maybe not complicated, but super. There's a lot of stuff in there, but for me, this is all the stuff that I want on every machine that relates to me in my home directory. So this is shared across every machine. And for Larry, it's slightly different. He doesn't use Emacs and some other stuff, but it's very similar. So the other mode of factoring that I have is for a per host factoring. And one of the files that's in here that will configure a host is called Nix 5.12. And this is referred to in one of the NixOS system configurations in the Flake thing. And it configures the system named ThinkNix 5.12. It's a ThinkPad P series laptop. Doesn't regularly move. That's why it's called Cecil. Has an encrypted ZFS root. And it uses DNS over TLS as possible. And it also has a Steam client on it. And then has a common set of packages that are common to every system. And I'll just explain a little bit about, first of all, this NixOS hardware thing. NixOS hardware is a repository in the Nix community GitHub organization that contains pre-chewed configuration for lots of types of hardware. ThinkPads, Dell laptops, Pinebooks, Acers, MacBook, all that stuff, all in there. And what it means is that you don't have to think too much about, getting your stupid wireless card working or your NVIDIA stuff working or whatever. You can just sort of include it from there, and lots of stuff will start to work. And I've done that here. I've also, I've told it it's a ThinkPad P51, which it is. And I've also told it has an SSD in it so that it does SSD trim over time. So I didn't have to write that configuration myself. I just included it from NixOS hardware. The other bit about it that is sort of interesting is this common Nix, and this is my own configuration. And there's some sort of uninteresting stuff. We configure Nix in here. We configure it to allow unfree packages and Nix packages, and some other various things that are not all that important. But the most important thing is that this is where my big list of environment system packages is defined. The things that I'm going to use interactively. I want to be able to use, I don't know, VLC or Chrome or Firefox or Audacity or GIMP, all these things that are just straight up end user applications, and I want installed on every machine. So that's why the common thing gets included in there. So let's take a closer look at the Nix 512 thing. Most of this stuff is done, most of the configuration of this machine is done by importing these files from a subdirectory of the current directory profiles. And this is how I sort of, if I add a new machine, I give it responsibilities and roles by reusing things from this profiles directory, or I create something new in the profiles directory and say, yes, I'm an Domini, you are doing this. But also in this file, I have configuration that's only specific to this particular machine, because this machine has a big USB enclosure attached to it that houses my backups from all my systems. So these services Syncwood and services Sano thing relate to being able to do that. This system backs up not only itself but a number of other systems that are in my domain, as it were. It also defines a number of environment system packages that are only related to that backup stuff. So this environment system packages will be merged with the one that's in the common Nix. You can just type. What's nice about Nix is it has sort of these merging features where if you define the same setting in multiple places, often it'll do the right thing. It'll say, yeah, I'll just environment system packages, I'll merge those two together. And that's what happens for this particular system. Only the only thing is these packages are only used on the system. Another less complicated system that I've set up is, and this is more like most of the other systems I have, is this thing is called Optinix, and this is like some little Dell Optiplex small form factor computer that I found. Most of the interesting stuff about it is spelled as an entry on this imports equal line. So it does speed tests, internet speed tests every so often. It is a backup source for that other system to go after. And there are some various things like by default, ZFS uses a lot of memory, so I try to prevent it on this system because it has less memory from doing that, and just whatever you need to do in each individual thing. It's possible to override settings that are spelled from the imports or the common or whatever. It's quite useful. Each one of these systems have roles in them that are spelled on those import lines. And inside, most of those roles come from this profiles directory. I don't know why I call it profiles, just whatever. I had to come up with a name. So, for instance, we can say that it's a P-Series laptop. This is all the stuff. This is sort of the hardware configuration for a P-Series laptop, the moral equivalent of hardware configuration.nix when you first configure your first NixOS machine. Or it might be a ThinkPad T-Series laptop that looks like that. Or it might be something that has Steam on it. If I want some machines I don't care about having Steam on, some do, so I factor that into here. Or it might be a machine that very rarely moves. Don't turn off my machine. Don't suspend my machine when I close the lid, and bump up the performance. For what it's worth, probably worth very little. But Uh, every other machine that I have, you know, all the most of my machines are laptops. They move around, so having the when you shut the lid on the laptop, you do want it to sleep. But on this particular one, it's just set up and it very rarely moves. It's my main machine. It might be a backup source, in which case we do a bunch of stuff. So this is my current configuration. Uh, and if I want to go and add a new system to this list of things, I've sort of written this down for myself. It's for nobody else. But the readme.rst of this particular repository, a link to this thing will also be in this script over here. Before I start to set up the new system, I will edit the configuration, my NixOS configuration, adding a new system to the Nix packages thing. So in my Flake.nix, I will edit my Flake.nix and add another one of these to it. And I will give it a name, and I will decide which roles I want it to play, and I will decide which users I want to put on it, and I will create a new hosts entry for that, new hosts file for that, which is pretty generic, you know, at first, you know, and then I check all that stuff in, and then I run the NixOS installer. When I first boot the installer, I'll check out this. I haven't actually run the install thing yet, but I'll check out this Nix config within the NixOS installer on this system, and then I'll run this prep system.sh script, which does my hard drive partitioning, and it will do all the ZFS goodness that it needs to do in order to get my hard drive set up. It'll mount the prepared system on /mount, and then I need to move. It'll mount the ZFS goodness, and then it will run the NixOS installer. Then I need to move the thing that it generates, the Etsy NixOS configuration.nix and hardware.nix somewhere else, so that I can copy my actual configuration on top of it. I then run NixOS install. Sorry, the last step wasn't NixOS install; it was NixOS generate config or whatever it is in the thing. And then I, you know, reboot the system. In which case, I am booted to a system that has all my stuff on it, all my software, and hopefully I can get into a desktop environment. And then I have to do some manual steps in here that are just too fiddly to try to do through Home Manager or anything like that. That is the way I use this thing. I continually add to it in that way. So anyway, I hope this helps somebody. Thanks for watching.